Before we start, if you enjoy the story, please leave a like and check if you're subscribed. The plasma bolt screamed past Dax Cortez's ear close enough to singe hair. He rolled behind the overturned cargo sled, ice crunching beneath his armored jacket as return fire lit up the gray afternoon. 3 weeks on this frozen hell, and the job had finally gone sideways. Movement flickered between the trees. He raised his rifle, then froze. A figure stumbled from cover, crimson blood stark against pale skin and winter furs, fox ears pressed flat against orange hair, not human, vulpine, and wounded. The woman clutched her side, blue eyes wild. Behind her, 3 attackers emerged from the forest, weapons raised. Dax's tactical brain screamed at him to stay down. His finger eased off the trigger. The woman's legs buckled. She went down hard, a bushy orange tail dragging through snow. Damn it! He was moving before the thought finished, boots pounding across open ground. He fired twice. The first attacker dropped, the other 2 scattered, guns swinging toward the woman. She looked up as his shadow fell across her. Those blue eyes went wide. Her mouth opened. Then plasma fire hit, and the world turned to burning agony. Dax felt the heat punch through his jacket, searing into his back. He crashed into the woman, arms wrapping around her, twisting so his bulk took the next shots. The smell of scorched flesh filled his nose. They hit the ground together. His vision blurred, but he kept his weight on her, shielding her. Her clawed fingers curled into his jacket. "You fool," she hissed. Then darkness took him. Pain woke him, deep, throbbing fire in his back. Dax tried to move and immediately regretted it. "Be still." The voice was female, accented. He forced his eyes open to find wooden beams overhead, amber lamplight, and the sharp smell of alien herbs. "My village. You've been unconscious for 3 days." He turned his head and found her sitting beside the bed, the woman from the ambush. Orange hair fell past her shoulders, fox ears swiveling toward him, her tail draped across her lap. She wore leather and fur that left her arms bare, bandages wrapped her torso. Blue eyes studied him with predatory intensity. "The convoy?" Scattered or dead, she held a clay cup to his lips. "Drink." The water tasted of minerals. He drank, watching her, her ears tilted forward. "You shouldn't have done what you did," she said. "Seemed like a good idea at the time." "You nearly died." Her fingers brushed the blanket's edge, claws retracting. "Why?" Dax tried to shrug and gasped. "Reflex." "Reflex." She stood, pacing to the window where snow fell outside. "Do all humans have such reflexes?" "Just the stupid ones." Something flickered in her eyes. She turned back. "My name is Ashira. Whether you intended it or not, you've invoked the Kyreth." "The what?" "A blood debt. You saved my life at risk of your own in combat, before witnesses. By our oldest laws, I owe you a debt that can only be repaid through service." Her expression went serious. "You are my ward until the debt is satisfied." "I don't want—" "What you want is irrelevant. The Kyreth is sacred. You're bound to me and I to you until honor is satisfied." "How long?" "Years, if necessary." She moved back to the bedside. "I didn't ask for this any more than you did, but I honor my debts." Dax met her eyes, seeing conflict there, pride and unhappiness, but underneath something else. Curiosity. "Dax," he said, "my name is Dax Cortez." "Dax," she tested the name. "Welcome to your new life." She turned to leave, and he noticed the hitch in her stride, still hurt. "Ashira." She paused. "Who were they?" Her ears flattened completely. "That's what concerns me. They weren't bandits. They were Varric's clan warriors." Her fingers tightened on the doorframe. "And they were hunting me specifically." Before he could respond, shouting erupted outside. Boots pounded on wood. Ashira's hand dropped to her knife as the door burst open. An elderly vulpine woman rushed in, gray fur on her ears. She spoke rapidly in her native tongue. Ashira's expression went ice cold. "What?" Dax pushed himself up. "What's happening?" Ashira fired questions at the healer. Whatever she heard made her tail bush out, every hair standing on end. "They brought in a survivor from the ambush, one of the attackers. She was already moving. He's dying, and he's asking for me." Dax threw the blankets back. "Then I'm coming." "You can't even stand." "The Kyreth goes both ways." He got his legs under him, using the bed frame for support. The room spun but steadied, Help me walk." For a moment he thought she'd refuse. Then she moved to his side, letting him drape an arm across her shoulders. Her body was warm, solid. "You're as stubborn as you are stupid," she muttered. "I've been told that." They made their way through the village. Vulpine faces watched from windows, wary. The wounded attacker lay in the healer's lodge, surrounded by warriors. Dark blue blood pooled beneath him. When Ashira entered, his eyes locked onto her. He spoke in the Vulpine language, words tumbling out weak and urgent. Ashira went rigid. The dying warrior kept talking, gesturing with one bloody hand, then made a motion like coins exchanging hands. When he finally fell silent, Ashira stood frozen. "What did he say?" Dax asked quietly. Ashira's voice came out flat, but her ears had pinned back. "He said he was paid very well, not to rob the convoy, to kill me." She turned to Dax. "The contract came from the capital, from someone in my father's court." The implications hit hard. "Your father, you said you were exiled." "I was. For my own protection, I thought." Her laugh held no humor. "But it seems someone decided that even in exile I'm still a threat. Then going back is suicide." "Perhaps." Ashira pulled away, standing alone, tail lashing. "But I can't hide here forever. Whoever sent them will try again. Next time, this village might pay the price." She looked at the dead warrior, then at Dax. "The Kyreth bound you to me," she said softly. "If you had known what danger it would bring, would you still have saved me?" Dax held her gaze, seeing the question beneath. Would he run now? Would he abandon her? He thought about the easy answer. Then he thought about her body beneath his as he took fire, about the way she'd called him a fool even as her hands gripped his jacket. "I would." Something in her expression softened just for a moment. Then the warrior's mask returned and she nodded once. "Then rest, Dax Cortez. Heal, because when you can walk without bleeding, we have work to do." Her ears swiveled forward. "Someone in my father's court wants me dead. I intend to find out who, and then I'm going to make them regret it." She strode from the lodge. Dax watched her go, watched how the warriors parted for her. He'd taken a job guarding a convoy. Now he was bound to a warrior princess with a target on her back, caught in assassination plots and royal conspiracies. The smart move would be to run. But when he closed his eyes, all he saw was her face as she'd looked up at him before the plasma fire hit, fierce and wild and alive. Maybe he was a fool after all. The village compound stretched across a frozen valley, wooden structures clinging to the mountainside. Dax spent the next week learning to walk again without his back screaming protest. The healer, Ilara, changed his bandages twice daily, her clawed hands surprisingly gentle. Ashira kept her distance those first days. He'd catch glimpses of her training with the village warriors, moving through combat forms that looked like dancing until you noticed the lethal precision. On the 8th day, she found him in the armory. "The warriors want to see what you can do," she said from the doorway. "I'm not a show." "No, you're a curiosity bound by Kyreth to their exiled princess." Her tail swished. "Humor them, or they'll never trust you." "And you, do you trust me?" Ashira stepped closer, close enough that he could smell whatever oil she used in her hair. "I trust that you're either very brave or very stupid." Her blue eyes searched his face. "But you could have run by now. Why do you stay?" "Because when I close my eyes, I see you looking up at me." "Unfinished business," he said instead. Something flickered across her expression. "Then come, show the warriors what human combat looks like." The courtyard was packed. Captain Fenix stepped forward, a scarred vulpine with silver streaks through his black fur. "Let's see if the human can protect himself," Fenix said. Fenix came in fast, blade low. The vulpine style was all speed and angles. Dax sidestepped, letting Fenix's momentum carry him past, then drove an elbow into the captain's kidney. They traded blows, the crowd's murmurs rising. Dax gave ground when he needed to. Let Fenix think he had the advantage. Then he stopped retreating. Fenix lunged for a throat strike. Dax caught his wrist, twisted, swept the captain's legs, and rode him down. He pinned the blade hand and put his forearm across Fenix's throat. The courtyard went silent. Dax released him and stood offering a hand. Fenix accepted. "You fight like you have no honor," Fenix said. "I fight to win. The captain's ears flicked forward. "You'll do, human." Dax turned to find Ashira watching from the courtyard's edge. She crooked a finger, then disappeared into a side building. He followed. The bathhouse had steam rising from pools fed by hot springs. Ashira stood beside the largest pool, unlacing her training leathers. "What are you doing?" Dax asked. "You stink of sweat and old bandages. So do I." She shrugged out of the leather top, revealing bandages around her ribs. "The hot water will help your healing." She unwrapped the bandages, revealing the angry red scar across her ribs. She stepped into the pool with a sigh sinking to her shoulders. Her tail floated behind her. "Join me, we need to talk." He hesitated, then removed his clothes. The bandages came off last, revealing the burn scars across his back. He caught Ashira watching. The water was hot enough to make him hiss. He sank in across from her. "You impressed Phoenix," she said. "He could have taken me if he'd committed to the kill." "He was testing you." She tilted her head back, soaking her hair. When she straightened, water ran down her neck. "Tell me about yourself, Dax Cortez." "Long story. We have time." He met her eyes, saw genuine curiosity there. "Grew up on a colony world. Pirates hit us when I was 17. Killed my parents." He shrugged. "Signed up with the Colonial Marines the next day." "We're not so different then. Both of us learned violence as an answer to helplessness." "You're a princess. How helpless could you have been?" Her laugh was bitter. "My mother died when I was 10, poisoned at a state dinner. They never found who did it." Her claws extended, scoring the pool's edge. "My father sent me away after that. For my protection, he said. Really, he just couldn't bear to look at me. I have her eyes." She moved closer, and he felt her tail brush his leg under the water. "Someone in my father's court wants me dead. I need to know who, and I need proof. That means going back to the capital." "That's suicide. Only if we're stupid about it." Her hand found his under the water, clawed fingers tracing his knuckles. "I know the court. You know combat, tactics. Together. Together we might live long enough to find your assassin. Or we might die trying." Her blue eyes searched his. "But I can't do this alone. I'm asking you as something else, as whatever this is between us." The word hung in the steam between them. "What is this?" he asked quietly. Ashira's ears flattened slightly. "I don't know. Vulpine don't bond easily. We're territorial, solitary, but you—" Her hand tightened on his. "When I woke in that clearing with you bleeding on top of me, I felt something I've never felt before. Safe, protected, chosen." She broke off as his free hand cupped her jaw, thumb brushing her cheek. "It's not just proximity," he said. Her breath caught. They were inches apart now, her tail wrapping around his leg, her body radiating heat. Her lips parted. Then boots pounded on wood outside, and Alara's voice called urgently in Vulpine. Ashira jerked back, ears swiveling. She called back, received an answer that made her go rigid. Dax asked. "A ship, landing in the village square." She was already climbing out, grabbing her clothes. "Royal colors, my father's colors." "He's here?" "His envoy at minimum." She dressed quickly. "This is either very good or very bad." Dax pulled on his clothes. "Which do you think?" Ashira's ears flattened as she strapped on her weapons. "I think we're about to find out exactly how far this conspiracy reaches." Outside, the village had gone quiet. Every face turned toward the sky where a sleek ship descended through falling snow, its hull bearing the royal seal. Whatever happened next would change everything. The ship settled into the village square, snow swirling away from its landing thrusters. Dax stood beside Ashira as the ramp descended, his hand instinctively moving toward where his sidearm would be if he still had one. King Valoran emerged first. He was larger than Dax expected, easily 7 feet tall with silver-gray fur on his ears and a presence that made the air feel heavier. His robes were white and blue, trimmed with something that caught light like frozen starlight. Behind him came 6 warriors in ceremonial armor, and behind them, a figure in chancellor's robes. Ashira went rigid beside him, her tail bushed out. "That's Mordain," she whispered, "my father's chief advisor." The chancellor was older, his orange fur faded to copper, but his eyes were sharp as he surveyed the village. Those eyes lingered on Ashira, then moved to Dax. King Valoran's gaze found his daughter. For a moment, something raw crossed his features, grief, relief, love. Then the royal mask slammed back into place. "Ashira," he said, his voice carrying across the square. "My daughter." She stepped forward, and Dax moved with her. The king's eyes flicked to him, taking in the healing burns visible at his collar. "Father," Ashira said carefully, "this is unexpected." "Is it? You were nearly killed. Did you think I wouldn't come?" Valoran descended the ramp. "When word reached me that my daughter survived because a human mercenary threw himself into plasma fire, I had to see this human for myself." Dax met the king's stare. Those eyes were the same blue as Ashira's, but colder. "Your Majesty," Dax said, inclining his head slightly. "Dax Cortez," Valoran circled him slowly. "A mercenary with no house, no holdings, no allegiance beyond coin, yet you saved my daughter's life at great personal cost. Why?" Seemed like the right thing to do. The right thing, Valoran's ears flicked. How refreshingly simple. And the Kyrith, do you understand what you've invoked? "I'm learning." "Are you? The Kyrith is sacred to my people. It cannot be bought, sold, or dismissed. You are bound to my daughter until the debt is repaid." His eyes narrowed. "Some might call it convenient. A mercenary with no standing suddenly elevated through an ancient custom." Dax felt Ashira tense beside him. "Father, he didn't know." "Peace, daughter." Valoran raised a hand. "I'm not accusing him. I'm simply stating facts." He turned to Chancellor Mordain, who stepped forward carrying a sealed case. Valoran opened it. Inside lay a blade, curved, elegant, its metal the color of moonlight on ice. Gems studded the pommel. "This is Winterbane," Valoran said, "forged from the heart of a fallen star. It has been carried by champions of my house for 3 centuries. He held it out to Dax. "I give it to you now, along with a formal position as my daughter's personal guardian. You will have quarters in the palace, access to royal resources, and the authority to act in her defense as you see fit." Dax stared at the blade. It was magnificent, and it was a collar. "Your Majesty, There's more." Valoran's expression shifted. "Return with us to the capital. Serve my daughter faithfully. Protect her as you did in that clearing, and when the Kyrith is satisfied, I will offer you a place at court, permanently, as more than just her guardian." The implication hung in the cold air. Ashira made a small sound beside him. "Father, you can't." "I can, and I am." Valoran looked at his daughter, and now the grief showed through. "You were right to refuse the coalition marriage. I should never have asked it of you. But you need an alliance, Ashira. You need someone strong enough to stand beside you, someone who has already proven they would die for you." His gaze moved back to Dax. "Someone who isn't bound by our politics." Dax's mind raced. This wasn't just a gift. It was a test, and possibly the only way to get close enough to find whoever wanted Ashira dead. "And you, Chancellor?" Dax asked. "What do you think about all this?" Mordain smiled, showing teeth. "I think, mercenary, that you have stumbled into something far larger than you understand, but if you truly care for the princess's safety, you'll convince her to return with us." "Enough." Valoran's voice cut through the tension. "Ashira, I'm not ordering you, I'm asking. Come home, let me help you find who's responsible." Ashira looked at her father, conflict clear on her face. She turned to Dax. "What do you think?" Every eye in the square turned to him. "I think," Dax said slowly, "that your father's right about one thing. Here, you're isolated. Whoever wants you dead knows where you are, and they'll keep sending assassins until one gets lucky." He met Valoran's gaze. "But I also think that walking into the capital without knowing who your enemies are is dangerous." "Then what do you suggest?" Valoran asked. "Information. We need to know who hired the Varix clan, who had the access, the motivation, the coin." Mordain's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Several factions, unfortunately," the Chancellor said. "Those who opposed her mother's reforms, those who fear her popularity with the military, those who benefit from succession ambiguity." "I'll provide a full briefing once we're secure in the palace," Mordain added smoothly. Valoran nodded. "Ashira, the ship leaves within the hour. Will you come?" Ashira looked at Dax, and he saw the question there. "I'll come," he said, "but on one condition." Valoran's ears swiveled forward. And that is? No one touches her without going through me first. Not guards, not advisors, not coalition partners. Dax took the blade from the case. You give me this sword in this position. It means something. It means I have authority. Done, Valoran said without hesitation. You have my word as king. Ashira's tail wrapped around Dax's wrist briefly. When he glanced at her, he saw gratitude and something else. Then will come, she said. But father, understand that I'm not the girl you sent away. I won't be controlled or managed or married off for politics. I know, Valoran's expression softened. You're your mother's daughter, fierce, stubborn, and far braver than I deserve. He turned back toward the ship. Mordain lingered, his gaze moving between Dax and Ashira. An interesting development, the Chancellor said quietly. I wonder how it will play out. Then he followed the king up the ramp. Dax turned to Ashira. They were alone in the square now. Are you sure about this? She asked. No, but staying here gets you killed slower. At least in the capital we can hunt. We, she smiled slightly. I like that word. Get used to it. He touched her face, and her ears swiveled toward him. The Kyrith binds us, remember? Where you go, I go. Even into a nest of assassins and traitors. Especially there. Ashira leaned into his touch for a moment, then pulled back. Then we should prepare. The capital isn't like the frontier. It's all games and hidden knives and smiles that mean nothing. Probably, he smiled, but I'll have you there to guide me. They walked back toward the healer's lodge. Alara met them at the door, her expression troubled. You're leaving, she said. We have to, Ashira replied, but thank you, Alara, for everything. The old healer touched Ashira's face gently, then looked at Dax. Protect her, human, not just her body, her heart. Dax said. Alara pressed something into his hand, a small vial filled with dark liquid. What is this? Insurance, Alara said quietly. The powder in that vial is lethal to Vulpine, harmless to humans. If you find yourself in a position where trust becomes a luxury you cannot afford. Dax pocketed the vial, understanding. The old healer didn't trust the king's court. An hour later, they boarded the ship. The interior was all polished metal and soft lighting. Ashira looked out the viewport as they lifted off, watching her sanctuary shrink beneath them. Dax moved to stand beside her, their fingers intertwined. No going back now, she said softly. No, he agreed, but we're not going in blind. The ship punched through the atmosphere, heading toward the glittering spires of the capital, toward danger and whoever wanted Ashira dead. But they weren't alone anymore. They had each other. And that would have to be enough. The capital city of Kirith sprawled beneath them like a jewel embedded in ice. Spires of white stone pierced the clouds, connected by bridges that glowed with bioluminescent light. The palace sat at the city's heart, massive and carved from what looked like a single piece of glacier. Dax pressed his hand against the viewport. It's beautiful, he said. It's a trap, Ashira replied. Her ears were flat. Every beautiful thing here has teeth. The ship landed on a private platform. When the ramp descended, an honor guard waited, 20 warriors in ceremonial armor. Behind them stood courtiers in elaborate robes, their faces masks of polite curiosity. A tall, vulpine woman in deep purple robes stepped forward. Her fur was pristine white, her eyes amber. Princess Ashira, she said warmly, welcome home. Lady Saris, Ashira replied carefully. Head of the palace guard, Ashira said quietly to Dax. She reports to my father. Mordain appeared at Valoran's side. Your Majesty, the council is assembled. Let them wait. My daughter needs rest. Of course, I've prepared the ambassador's suite for the human. He stays in my wing, Ashira said. Silence fell. Several courtiers exchanged glances. Daughter, Valoran said carefully, that's highly irregular. The Kyrith is irregular, Ashira's tail lashed. He's my guardian. That means he stays close. She's right, Dax said. If I'm protecting her, I need proximity. Valoran studied them both, then nodded. Very well, Mordain, arrange it. The Chancellor's expression didn't change, but Dax saw his claws extend slightly before retracting. They moved through the palace, walls of carved ice that never melted, embedded with lights that pulsed like captured stars. Ashira's quarters were in the northern tower, vast, dominated by a fireplace with blue flames. Furs covered the floor, weapons decorated the walls. "Your chamber is through there," Ashira said, pointing to a side door. "It connects to mine." "The council meets in 2 hours," Mordain said from the doorway. "They'll want to question both of you." "Fine," Ashira said. "We'll be there." Mordain's gaze lingered on Dax. "I do hope you're prepared, mercenary. Court politics can be treacherous for outsiders." "I'll manage." When they were alone, Ashira moved to the window. "He's involved," she said quietly. "Mordain. I'd bet my life on it." "Maybe." Dax came to stand beside her. "But he's too obvious. Either he's guilty and stupid, or he wants us to think he's guilty." "A distraction." "Possibly." He turned her to face him. "We need to be smart. Trust no one." "I trust you." The words hung between them. Ashira's hand came up to rest on his chest. He covered it with his own. "Then let's use that," he said. "They'll expect us to be suspicious of each other. Let's show them something else. Let's show them we're united." "How?" He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "By making them believe this is real." Ashira pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Her pupils were dilated. "What if it is real?" she whispered. Dax's hand moved to her jaw, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Her ears flattened in submission, in trust. "Then we're both in trouble," he said. He kissed her. She made a small sound against his mouth, surprise melting into heat. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. Her tail wrapped around his leg, and when he deepened the kiss, she opened for him. They broke apart, breathing hard. "That felt real," she managed. It was. She pushed him toward her bedroom, and he went willingly. The space was dominated by an enormous bed covered in furs. She backed him onto it, climbing into his lap. "We have 2 hours," she said, her voice rough. "That's not enough time." "Then we'll make it count." She kissed him again, fierce and demanding. His hands found the laces of her tunic, working them loose while her claws raked lightly down his back, careful of his healing wounds. The tunic came off, then his shirt, and skin met skin. She was warm everywhere, her body lithe and strong. When he rolled them over, pinning her beneath him, she arched into the contact with a sound that went straight to his core. Time became fluid. There was only her body, her sounds, the way she said his name like a prayer. When they finally came together, her claws dug into his back and she cried out, triumph and surrender at once. After, they lay tangled together. Ashira traced the burn scars across his ribs. "These will fade," she said softly. "Maybe." He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. "But I'll always remember why I got them." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "When this is over, what then? What do you want?" "I want this, you, not because of the Kyrith or politics, just because you're you and I—" She stopped. "I think I'm falling in love with you." Dax pulled her down, kissing her deeply. "Then we're both in trouble," he murmured, "because I'm already there." A knock at the door shattered the moment. "Princess," came a servant's voice, "the council awaits." They dressed quickly, helping each other with laces and weapons. Dax strapped Winterbane to his hip. The council chamber was circular, seats arranged in a rising spiral. Vulpine nobles in rich robes, military officers in armor, merchants in practical clothing. Mordain sat at Valoran's right hand. Every eye turned to them as they entered. Valoran gestured to 2 empty seats. "My daughter has returned, and with her the human who saved her life." A noble with gray fur stood. "Your Majesty, with respect, a human in such a position?" "He earned it with his blood," Valoran said coldly. "Does anyone here wish to question that?" Silence. "Good. Now to business. Someone hired Varric's clan warriors to kill my daughter. Someone in this city, possibly in this room." The king's gaze swept the council. "I want names. I want evidence." Mordain stood smoothly. "Your Majesty, we've been investigating. The contract was arranged through intermediaries, but we've traced it to a member of the old noble houses, someone with access to significant funds and connections to the Varric's clan." "Who?" Ashira demanded. Mordain's eyes gleamed. "Lord Terax, head of House Silverclaw." "That's a lie." An elderly vulpine with silver fur shot to his feet, trembling with rage. I would never. My house has served the crown for 6 generations. And yet the evidence suggests otherwise, Mordain said quietly. He produced a data slate, payment records, communication logs, all pointing to your house. The room erupted. Guards moved forward. Dax watched it all, and he saw it, the barest flicker of satisfaction on Mordain's face. Too neat, too convenient. He leaned close to Ashira. It's a setup. I know, she whispered, but how do we prove it? Guards seized Lord Terax, dragging him toward the door despite his protests. Princess, please, I'm loyal. Then as Terax passed Mordain's seat, the Chancellor's sleeve caught on the old noble's claws. For just a second, his wrist was exposed, and Dax saw it, a mark burned into the skin, the same mark he'd seen on the dying assassin's wrist. The Varix clan brand. Dax's hand went to Winterbane's hilt. Ashira felt the movement, followed his gaze, and her eyes widened. Mordain noticed them noticing. His expression shifted. Guards, the Chancellor said quietly, secure the doors. The room went silent. 20 guards moved to block every exit. Valoran stood. Mordain, what is this? This, Your Majesty, Mordain said, producing a weapon from his robes, is a coup. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Nobles scrambled for cover, guards drew weapons, and Valoran's roar cut through the confusion like a blade. But the guards didn't move. They stayed at the doors, weapons trained on the council members. Dax realized with cold clarity that these weren't Valoran's loyal soldiers. They were Mordain's. I'm sorry it's come to this, Your Majesty, Mordain said, his weapon aimed at the king. But you've left me no choice. Your daughter's return threatens everything I've built, everything I've worked for. You killed those people, Ashira said, her voice shaking with rage. The convoy, the villagers who sheltered me, all of it, just to get to me? Collateral damage. Mordain shrugged. I needed you dead before you could return and claim your birthright, before you could undo all the reforms I've carefully dismantled in your absence. My mother's reforms, Ashira spat. You killed her too, didn't you? Mordain's smile was cold. Your mother was a visionary. Unfortunately, her vision didn't align with the reality of power. She had to go, and now, so do you. Dax's hand tightened on Winterbane's hilt, 20 guards all positioned strategically. The math was bad, but he'd fought through worse odds before. He caught Ashira's eye, saw her tail coiled tight, ready to spring. She gave the barest nod. Valoran stood, drawing himself to his full height. You overreach, Mordain. Kill me, and the military will hunt you to the ends of the system. Kill my daughter, and you'll have a civil war. Perhaps. Mordain gestured, and 2 guards moved toward Valoran. But I'll have your throne, and that's worth the risk. Besides, I won't be killing anyone. There will be a tragic accident. The human mercenary, unstable and violent, will attack the royal family. I'll be forced to put him down, along with anyone caught in the crossfire. That's your play? Dax said. It's elegant, really. The court already distrusts you, a human with no loyalty, bound to the princess through some primitive custom. Mordain's weapon shifted to aim at Dax. You'll make a perfect scapegoat. There's a problem with your plan, Dax said. Oh? I'm not dying today. He moved. Winterbane sang as it left its sheath, the blade catching light as Dax threw it. Not at Mordain, at the nearest guard. The blade buried itself in the Vulpine's throat, and before the body hit the ground, Dax was already moving. Ashira exploded into motion beside him. She vaulted over the council table, claws extended, and hit the second guard with enough force to drive him into the wall. Her hand came away with his weapon, and she fired twice, dropping 2 more guards before they could react. The council chamber descended into pandemonium. Dax retrieved Winterbane from the fallen guard, using the chaos as cover. A guard came at him from the left, blade high. Dax ducked under the strike, came up inside the guard's reach, and drove Winterbane through his chest. The blade was as sharp as promised. It punched through armor like paper. "Protect the king!" Lady Saris shouted, and suddenly she was beside Valoran, her own weapon drawn. Not one of Mordain's, then. Good. Mordain snarled and fired at Ashira. She twisted, the plasma bolt missing by inches, and returned fire. The Chancellor dove behind the council table. "Kill them!" he screamed. "Kill them all!" The remaining guards converged. Dax found himself back to back with Ashira, their movements instinctively coordinated. She covered high while he covered low, their fighting styles complementing each other perfectly. A guard lunged. Dax parried, riposted, felt Winterbane bite deep. Beside him, Ashira's claws opened a guard's throat, her tail whipping around to trip another. They fought like they'd trained together for years, not days. "We need to end this," Ashira shouted over the chaos. "Working on it." Dax spotted Mordain trying to flank around toward Valorin. The king was fighting off 2 guards with Cerys's help, but they were being pushed back toward the chamber's edge. No time for subtlety. Dax grabbed a fallen guard's plasma rifle, aimed, and fired a burst at the ornate chandelier above Mordain's position. The fixture exploded in a shower of ice and metal. Mordain threw himself sideways, and Dax was already moving, closing the distance. The Chancellor came up firing, but Dax was faster. He batted the weapon aside with Winterbane, stepped in close, and drove his fist into Mordain's throat. The Chancellor staggered, gasping. "You're finished," Dax said. Mordain's eyes bulged, then narrowed. His hand went to his belt, coming away with something small and metallic. Dax saw it and reacted on pure instinct. He grabbed Mordain's wrist, twisting hard. The device clattered to the floor, a detonator. "What did you do?" Dax demanded. Mordain smiled through bloody teeth. "Insurance. Charges throughout the palace. If I don't send the cancel code in 5 minutes," he coughed, "everyone dies." Ashira appeared beside them, breathing hard, blood spattered across her face, none of it hers. "He's bluffing." "Am I?" Mordain's smile widened. "Test me, princess. See what happens." Dax's mind raced through options. Kill Mordain now, the palace might explode. Let him live, he'd find another way to strike. Unless... He remembered the vial Ilara had given him. Insurance, she'd called it. "Give me the code," Dax said. "Never." Dax pulled out the vial, uncorked it. Mordain's eyes widened as he recognized what it was. "Silverbane powder," Dax said quietly. "Lethal to Vulpine, harmless to humans. The healer thought I might need it." He held it over Mordain's face. "Last chance, the code, or I dump this down your throat and watch you dissolve from the inside." Mordain's facade cracked. Fear showed through, raw and real. "You wouldn't. You're supposed to be the hero." "I'm a mercenary who's had a really bad month," Dax replied. "Try me." The chamber had gone quiet. The remaining guards were either dead or had surrendered. Valorin stood with Cerys, watching. Ashira's hand rested on Dax's shoulder. "The code," she said softly. "Now." Mordain's shoulders sagged. He rattled off a series of numbers, and Cerys quickly entered them into a terminal. A moment later, she nodded. Charges disarmed. Dax corked the vial and pocketed it. Mordain slumped in his grip. "Why?" Valorin approached, his voice heavy. "I trusted you. I gave you everything." "You gave me nothing," Mordain spat. "I earned my position. I built this court, and you would have thrown it all away for your daughter's idealistic fantasies." He looked at Ashira with pure hatred. "Your mother tried to give power to the common houses, to dilute the nobility. I stopped her then, and I would have stopped you." "But you failed," Ashira said, "and now everyone knows what you are." Guards, loyal ones this time, entered the chamber. Valorin gestured, and they took Mordain into custody. The Chancellor didn't resist. The fight had gone out of him. As they dragged him away, Lord Terrax was brought back in, confused and shaken. Valorin personally apologized, promising to restore his house's honor. Then the king turned to Dax and Ashira. "You saved my life," he said simply. "Both of you, I owe you a debt I can never repay." "You don't owe us anything," Ashira said. "He was my enemy as much as yours." "Perhaps." Valorin looked between them, seeing how close they stood, how her tail was wrapped around his leg, how his hand rested on her hip. "But I see now that my offer wasn't just political convenience. You two, you're already bonded. Truly bonded." "We are," Dax said. Valorin nodded slowly. "Then I give you my blessing, not as a king making a political alliance, but as a father who wants his daughter to be happy." He placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "Marry her, Dax Cortez. Make it official. Make it real." Ashira looked up at Dax, and he saw the question in her eyes. "I was going to ask eventually," he said. "Might as well be now." She laughed, the sound bright and free. "Yes, obviously, yes." They kissed, and the court, what remained of it, erupted in applause. Even Saris was smiling. When they broke apart, Ashira rested her forehead against his. "So what now?" she asked. "Now?" Dax smiled. "Now we rebuild, together. You bring your mother's reforms back. I help you survive the inevitable attempts to stop you. We fight, we argue, we make up spectacularly." "Sounds exhausting." "Sounds perfect." She kissed him again, deeper this time, and he felt her tail tighten around his leg. "I love you," she whispered against his mouth. "I love you too." 3 months later, they stood in the palace gardens as the first thaw began. Ice melted into streams that fed new growth. Ashira wore ceremonial robes that left her arms bare, and Dax wore formal armor that felt too stiff. The ceremony was a blend of human and vulpine traditions. Valorin presided, speaking words older than the palace itself. When he asked if they came freely to this bond, they answered together. "We do." When he asked if they would protect each other, honor each other, love each other through all the days ahead, they answered again. "We will." And when he asked if they understood that this bond could never be broken, not by time or distance or death itself, they smiled. "We do." Valorin bound their hands together with a silk cord. "Then by the power vested in me, and by the ancient right of the Kyrith made manifest, I declare you bonded, husband and wife, partners in all things." They kissed as the crowd cheered. Ashira's ears were forward, her tail swishing contentedly. Dax held her close, feeling the rightness of it settle into his bones. "No regrets?" she asked. "Not one." "Good, because you're stuck with me now." "Best collar I ever wore." She laughed and pulled him toward the reception, where food and drink waited. As they walked, Dax looked up at the palace, at the city beyond, at the world they'd saved and would now help govern. He'd come to this frozen planet for a paycheck. He was leaving with a wife, a kingdom, and a future he'd never imagined. Not a bad trade.